Hi, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. Everyone strong and healthy today? Good. Glad to see that. Glad to see that. Okay. Is it good? Okay. Tvameva mata cha pita tvameva bandhuscha saka tvameva vidya dravinam tvameva sarvam mama deva. You alone are our mother. You alone are our father. You alone are our closest relation and our dearest friend. You alone are our knowledge and our wealth. You are our all in all, O Lord. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. Good morning, everybody. I wanted to speak on Swami Vivekananda today because it's been one utterly insane year, and we really need to pull up some of his strength and wisdom right now. We really need to sort of get past the tornado that seems to be going on. And so he's more relevant today now than he's ever been. And more relevant, actually, than he was in 1893. So if there was ever a time when we needed the presence of Swami Vivekananda in our lives, it would be now. We have a tendency to put Swami Vivekananda in the past tense. We sort of, have him in a sepia photograph where it's kind of quaint and sweet and charming period piece. But we don't tend to have him as this vivid, living presence in our lives. But he is a living presence in our lives if that's what we want. And I personally think we need it. Swamiji dramatically changed this country in 1893 when he came for the Parliament of Religions. And that initial visit is still having far-reaching effects, and the dominoes in this country are still falling because of Swamiji coming to this country then. But we think that was then, and this is now. Now things are different. There's been so many changes. But Swamiji is meant to be as current and as relevant and as meaningful as the news feed on Twitter, as CNN, as Fox, as MSNBC or PBS, whatever that is. And it's a lot more truthful. All the New York Times and CNN and all that give us information, tidbits of information or disinformation. But they can't give us something that's lasting. They can't help us pull out of this tornado of a world, and they can't give us peace. They can't give us contentment. They can't give us a higher understanding. It just increases the tornado. We all know this has been a really trying year. It could be a trying spring. We don't know. Things are definitely getting better, but we're and still trying to come to figure out what a normal year would be like. But we've been through this hellish pandemic and everything that's been associated with it, all the craziness, all the fear, all the anger, people not wearing masks somehow, that becoming this big deal. People just became crazy. The whole country became crazy. So we really need to not get involved in that vortex there and to get that bracing fresh air and that strength-giving sanity that Swamiji is there to give. We need him now more than ever. So if and when we decide that we want to, for some reason, get involved in that insanity or we get pulled into it, we need to be able to pull out of it. We have to pull out of it and try to gain a higher vision of what life is. We have to remember who we really are. And so we don't get caught up in these things that make us smaller than we are and make us forget who we really are. They make us feel not only small, but they make us feel like we're at the mercy of forces beyond our control. So if Swamiji were standing here, what would he say? Say, with infinite kindness and love and a lot of humor. He'd say, wake up, wake up. You are lions believing that you're sheep. You wake up. He said, you are the infinite. You are pure. You are perfect. You are eternal. You were never born. You will never die. Say, ye are divinities on earth. It's like, whoa, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear something that lifts me up, not smashes me down. Swamiji taught strength, that tremendous inner strength that comes from our own divine nature. It's not knocking down doors. It's that tremendous strength of our own real nature, that's who we are. Our real nature is infinite and purity itself, and that in itself gives us such infinite strength and power. Because all potential is latent within us. We just have to access it. We just have to dehypnotize ourselves. Josephine McLeod was a beloved student of Swami Vivekananda. She said, I am his friend. I'm not a disciple, which he was perfectly happy with. And if you I was thinking how in the Bhakti schools of Vedanta, they have these relationships that you have with God, whether he's your mother or your father or your child or your sweetheart or a friend. She definitely had Swamiji was her friend. And it's so obvious from reading what she said and people who knew her and her correspondence. He was everything to her. And she had a very long association. And her niece, Prasanna, Catherine Whitmarsh, lived right across the street. So heard a lot about Josephine McLeod, otherwise known as Tontine, and her memories of Swamiji. So Josephine McLeod wrote in a letter, the thing that held me in Swamiji was his unlimitedness. She said, I could never touch bottom or top or sides. She said, the amazing size of him. She wrote, oh, such natures make one feel so free. She said, really interestingly, she said, it's the reaction on oneself that matters, isn't it? She said, what one gets out of it. Well, that's really what we need and want right now, that sense of the unlimitedness, the infinite, that we can access, that we don't have to be caught in this stuff, to be aware of our own freedom. You know, a holy person can just be who they are. They're just immersed in their own bliss, immersed in their joy. They're immersed in their experience of divinity. But what makes the difference is how they make us feel, how they make us feel about ourselves, about our own capacities, about our own capability of experiencing that ourselves. And that's what she said. It's the effect on us that makes the difference. So what happens when we feel bad? Last night I had a question. It's like, so what do we do when we have despair? It's like, what happens when we feel that we are at the mercy of external forces beyond our control? And we say, oh, right, Swamiji. Swamiji says strength is within us, all power is within us, but you know what? I sure don't feel it. I don't know that I believe it. So I'm sure not aware of it. So Swamiji has an answer to that, because he said, say to yourself, this misery that I am suffering is of my own doing. And that very thing proves that it will have to be undone by me alone. That which I created, I can demolish. Therefore, he said, stand up, be strong. He said, take the whole responsibility on your own shoulders. And he said, and know that you are the creators of your own destiny. He said, all the strength and succor that you want is within yourself. You know, there's nothing more irritating that when you're in a bad place and something terrible has happened, someone comes up to you and says, oh, you did it to yourself. And that sort of sounds like what Swamiji is saying here. It's like, well, you did it to yourself. But it's actually, we think that he ought to be, cutting us some slack here. It's like, we really have had one hell of a year. I mean, it's been over 100 years since we had a pandemic. I mean, the breach of the capital of this country hasn't been breached since the War of 1812, when in 1814, the British burned down the Capitol building. That's over 200 years ago. So you think he would cut us some slack for this really incredibly terrible, ridiculous, horribly bad year. But he doesn't. Swamiji is basically saying, this suffering is of my own doing. Thank you. How could that be? Well, it's our karma. Whatever we are experiencing in this world right now, whether it's our happiness, our misery, our joy, our sorrow, our illness, our health, our strength, our weakness, it's money, not money. It's the result of our karma alone. Our own actions, our own thoughts inevitably have their own effect. The karma follow the effects of these thoughts and actions. And they play out in our lives. So everyone on the planet right now, that's my dog barking. You just have to ignore him. She's going to bark some deer out there. So everyone on the planet right now is having this nice big bowl of karma full of their own. We're all experiencing the results of our own actions, good and bad, up and down. In Swamiji's great poem, The Song of the Sannyasin, he says, who sows must reap, they say, and cause must bring the sure effect, good, good, bad, bad, and none escape the law. But whoso wears a form must wear the chain, too true. But far beyond both name and form is Atman, ever free. No, thou art that. Say Om Tat Sat Om. Like, whoa, we're beyond that. Swamiji says, yes, we're all of us, experience the results of our own actions, both good and bad, our karma. But our real nature, the Atman, is far beyond experiencing that. That's what we have to identify with. That's because that's who we really are. Swamiji continually emphasized the divinity of the soul, to remind ourselves who we are, the divinity of the soul. Continually remind ourselves who and what we are, the grandeur of our own nature. He said, the soul, by its nature, is pure and perfect, infinite in power and blessed. So what would Swamiji say about all this insanity going on now? He'd say, don't identify with it. Just because there's a tornado going on doesn't mean you pull yourself in the middle of it. We have to, we can't get pulled into the vortex, or else we'll lose our bearings. We'll lose our peace of mind. We don't want to lose our peace. Okay, so I say, okay, but we think, is there some way I can make this better? Sometimes we just have to be an observer. We have to observe it like we're going to a circus or watching a horror film. And we don't get involved until something comes into our orbit, as our beloved senior nun Pravrajika used to say. When it comes into our orbit, then we deal with it. We don't go out and look for it. When it comes into our orbit, then we deal with it kindly, as much as possible, sanely, keeping our boundaries, making sure other people respect our boundaries and respect everybody else. But we don't go out looking for a fight. We stay in our own individual field of action, whatever it may be. If we're confronted with it, we deal with it, remembering the whole time that we are the Atman and so is everybody else. This whole world is suffused with divinity. We can believe that we're the Atman and our friends, they got a great Atman too, but nobody else. The people we don't like, oh, they've forgotten they've got one. No, it doesn't work that way. We don't want to get caught up in the tornado. We don't want to get caught up in all the drama, the ever-changing mishiga that's this world. Because all the tornadoes, all the tragedies, all the drama won't give us what we need in this life. It won't give us a firm foundation for peace and strength. And it won't give us the fearlessness when we have to leave this planet, when we leave all this play behind. It won't be there for us. We've got to leave the play behind and know that we're not the play. We're not the drama. We're not the tornado. Never have been, never will be. Swamiji was, after he'd come back from America, was in Bellarmont, and he was in his room, and a small little group of students came in, a group of college students, and they had been studying philosophy, which at that time meant exclusively Western philosophy. They'd been studying it in college. And so Swamiji said, can you tell me the grandest of all truths in life? It's like, they didn't say a thing because it's like, like, how do I, this great man is saying this to me. I'm just going to be quiet because I don't want to make a mistake. So Swamiji said to them, look here, here's the grandest of all truths. We shall all die. Like, huh? He said, bear this in mind always. And then the spirit within will wake up. He said, then only meanness will vanish from you. Practicality and work will come, and you will get new vigor in your body and your mind. And those who come in contact with you will actually be able to gain something from you. They'll get something from you. Now, this is obviously not what they or anybody else was expecting to hear. So if it seems like weird or morbid, let's think about it again. Why will the spirit within wake up? Because we'll realize this is temporary. This is here a short time. This is temporary. The body is temporary. The mind is temporary. My family is temporary. My house is temporary. My job is temporary. My relationships are temporary. My little loves, my little hates, my opinions are all temporary. They're gone. They're gone in a heartbeat, literally. They're gone without a trace when we close our eyes for the last time and we move on. So if we know that and really think about it, then we don't get involved in the tornado. We realize this is ridiculous. This is not going to help me or anybody else. That's when we try to remember, I am the Atman. I'm ever free. I'm untouched by all this. I'm untouched by birth or death or disease or health, any of it, grief, despair, happiness, untouched. So here's a really good question. Why should we listen to him? Why should we care what Swami Vivekananda has to say? It's like, that's great what he said, but shouldn't we listen to someone who's more contemporary, someone who's more relevant, someone who's more in tune with the times, who's been really aware of all the changes that are going on? I mean, so much has happened since he died in 1902. Well, because he's a handful of the most trustworthy people you will ever encounter in your life. You know that if it's something he said, it's the truth. It's the truth. Josephine MacLeod said the first time she heard him speaking, it was after she hadn't seen him at the Parliament, or maybe she had, but she didn't. First time she actually heard him speaking was in this little room in New York where he was giving classes, and he was just a small little group of 12, 15 people just sitting around. And she walked in, sat down, and he said something. She had no idea what it was now, but he said something, and I realized it was the truth. And the second sentence was the truth. And the third sentence was the truth. And she said everything, and she said, I listened to him for 7 years, and everything was truth. Everything he uttered was truth. And she said from that moment on, life had an entirely different meaning. It was as if he made you realize that you were in eternity. Like, whoa. What a wonderful freedom. It pulled her out of the small stuff and then made her realize that she is infinite and that she and everybody else is living in eternity, that we are free, that we're not bound and we've never been bound. We never can be bound. Really applicable to now. He told Josephine MacLeod, always remember you are only incidentally an American, only incidentally a woman, but you are always a child of God. Tell yourself day and night who you are. Never forget it. And I think that's really important now with all of our emphasis on the identity politics. It's like, I'm a woman. You just like, and you know, if people overstep, you got to deal with it. But you can't make it our whole identification because it's temporary. Gender is temporary. Nationality is temporary. It's all temporary. We have to put our attention as what isn't temporary. So when we hear about all these crazy things happening or things that just seem unfair, not right, hurtful, we have to pull back and remember, you know what? In the real big picture, it's an incidental. tell ourselves day and night who we are. I am the Atman. I am a child of God. I am a child of the Divine Mother. I'm a child of Sri Ramakrishna. I am the infinite. What is that to me? Nothing. We have to dehypnotize ourselves and start really telling ourselves who we are, rather than, I'm fat. Your body has gained weight. Oh my God, how temporary can you get? I'm old. How temporary can you get? Yeah, they do that, these bodies. We have to pull back from that nonsense and realize our own freedom. Swamiji's message was one of absolute freedom, freedom of the soul, freedom from any kind of bondage, any kind of delusion. He couldn't bear it to see people shackling themselves in chains. In that same poem, the Song of the Sannyasini, he said, thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. Then cease lament, let go thy hold. Let go the hold. Same Om Tat Sat Om. He said, Swamiji said, all our struggle is for freedom, not happiness, not misery. Our struggle is for freedom and freedom alone. And that's a huge reason why Swami Vivekananda resonated so strongly with Americans, because we love freedom. The way other countries love order, or the way that they love continuity, or the way that they love tradition, we love freedom. It's American catnip. We love it. And that is, you talk to us about freedom, you got our attention. We're there. We are absolutely there. Our anthem, home, the land of the free, home of the brave. It resonates with us because we feel both. Yeah, I'm an American. That's who we are. But as Swamiji knew only too well, only the free can be brave. There's a very strong corollary there. You can't be brave, real bravery, without freedom. Because freedom and the oneness of existence go hand in hand. They can't be separated. That unitary vision, that oneness of existence goes with freedom. They're inseparable. And that's one reason why he emphasized strength so much, both in India and in this country, the importance of developing one's own inner strength and manifesting it. He said, freedom can never be reached by the weak. He said, throw away your weakness. He said, tell your body it is strong. Tell your mind it is strong. Until you have unbounded faith and hope in yourself. That's really what we need. We're so busy pushing ourselves down that no one else has to do it for us. It's like, tell ourselves how strong we are, body and mind. So if there's something we need now more than ever, it's that message of strength, that strength in the storm, that strength to endure whatever's going to come our way, the strength to overcome all these obstacles that seem to be popping up, strength to overcome all difficulties. If we can remember this and remember our divinity and kind of live this truth and breathe it day and night, remembering who we are, who we already are. We don't have to become it. We are it already. So what really makes us free? The truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free, says the Bible. The truth about the nature of reality, the truth about the divinity lying at the very core of our being and the being and everyone else's. That divinity lies at the basis of everything and everyone. Long after Swamiji died, Josephine McLeod was asked, so, are you secure in your grasp of the ultimate? Quite a question for someone to be asking you, right? And she said, yes, utterly. She said, it is the truth that I saw in Swamiji that has set me free. Oh. And she said, and I think this is really important, she said, one's faults seemed so insignificant. Why remember your faults when one has the ocean of truth to be our playground? It's like, what a wonderful idea. We're all swimming in this ocean of divinity, this ocean of truth, and we're going to remember our faults, someone else's faults. How petty, how stupid. Why do that when we're swimming in an ocean of truth? We pay so much our attention to our own faults and being aware of other people's faults and being afraid that someone else is going to notice our faults. It makes us weak. It impedes our own freedom. It's so out of proportion to the truth with a capital T. It's so petty. And the whole thing just makes us fearful and makes us weak, and that we deny our own divinity. Humans make mistakes. As we all know, humans learn from mistakes. We know it all too well. Humans are fallible. Just ask yourself, ask your doctor. We just try to move forward, remembering that in the big picture, any mistake, it's all small in the big picture. We can't get caught up in it. Now, people who aren't really familiar with the works of Swamiji often accuse him of being contradictory. He says one thing to one person and another thing here, this thing he says here, the other thing he says there. It's not consistent. Of course he's not consistent. He was just speaking to different people. And we all know Emerson said, consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, and no one could accuse Swamiji of being little in anything. He was completely speaking to that person at the time. Josephine McLeod remembered that when they were at Ridgely, if you haven't been to Ridgely, which is our retreat in upper state New York, when the pandemic is over, please go there. It's one of the most inspiring, beautiful retreats you'll ever take. So one evening, they were sitting around in the great hall, and a big fire was going, and Swamiji was just speaking his thoughts. And he said something, and a woman who was sitting there said, Swamiji, I disagree with that. And he said, no? Then it's not for you. And then another woman said, but that's where I agree with you. And he said, then it's for you. Josephine McLeod said he had utter respect for other people's viewpoints, and he would never interfere with them because he believed that every person has their own inner way of developing, which will come in their own way, in their own time, and no one should ever interfere with that. Sometimes people think that Sri Ramakrishna is at one end of the spectrum and he's at the other because they seem so incredibly different. Sri Ramakrishna was lost in samadhi at all times. He was lost in meditation. He would be deep in samadhi, and then he would be dancing and singing and joyously being with the devotees, singing song after song after song in the gospel, and then they get up and dance. And Swami Vivekananda was like active, tirelessly working on every single front we can possibly imagine. Starting the Ramakrishna order in India, starting the Ramakrishna mission, which began service as worship of God, putting on the same footing as meditation and acts of devotion. It's an equal path to realization, which he ran into an unthinkable resistance, and everybody fought it, and now everybody else is doing the same thing. Service as a path to realization. He started the Vedanta societies in this country. He started an entire organization beginning in 1894. He started the order, the men's monastic order, and wanted a women's order started even before the men's order. He wanted a university at Bellarmont. It had great plans for what should be at the university. He was training the other direct disciples. He was training his own disciples. He was training everybody else's disciples. He was training the first great generation of monks. And he spent 4 years of his life in this country, and he only lived to be 39. He lived to be 39. Yet he spent almost 4 years of his life, sometimes lecturing 2 and 3 times a day. It's like, how could you do it? Traveling across the country by train. Like how could anyone survive that? He had immense energy and immense capacity because he had this razor focus, which he could put either towards meditation or towards work. He'd go there, put all of attention there, withdraw it, move it someplace else. He also was going into samadhi. He had deep meditation, so he went into samadhi at Thousand Island Park in New York, at Camp Percy in New Hampshire, at the shores of Lake Michigan, at Camp Taylor in Marin County. He had that intense capacity. So if he seems like the polar opposite for many people of Sri Ramakrishna, but as other direct disciples pointed out, Swamiji understood Ramakrishna the best, and he understood all the subtle implications of what Sri Ramakrishna said. Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual son, Swami Brahmananda Maharaj, said, Sri Ramakrishna was too great for the average mind to grasp. It was Swami Vivekananda who made his life and teachings understandable to all. He said, study Swamiji's works carefully, for unless you understand his teachings, it is useless for you to try to understand Sri Ramakrishna. That's clear. Read and study the teachings of both. So if we see a big disparity between the teachings, it's because we don't really see the incredible subtlety lying in Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, which is why Sri Ramakrishna made him his chosen vessel, for his messenger, for giving his teachings to the world. And there's actually a perfect continuity between Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda. And remember, too, that just before Sri Ramakrishna died, he touched Narayan, went into a deep meditative state, as did Swami Vivekananda. And he poured all of his spiritual energy into him. And he said, after it was over, Sri Ramakrishna said, now I've become a fakir. I'm a beggar now. So here's an example of this perfect continuity. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna said, one must love all. No one is a stranger. It is the Lord alone who dwells in all beings. Holy Mother very famously said, if you wish to find peace of mind, do not find faults in others. Rather see your own faults. No one is a stranger. Exact same words. The whole world is your own. Swami Vivekananda said, first kill your ego and then take the whole world as yourself. Almost exactly the same words. And then he continues, as the old Christians used to say, the old man must die. The old man is this selfish idea that this whole world is made for our enjoyment. Okay, so Swamiji says the whole world as yourself. The deeper meaning, the old man, is the ego who stands in the way, doesn't allow us to see this unity of existence. Because we think there's me and then there's everybody else. How can we see the world as our own when we think there's me and everybody else, when there's this duality? And the corollary to that is that the ego thinks the world is meant for our enjoyment, because we think, I'm in the world, I'm going to get as much happiness out of this as I can and as least misery I can. So I'm going to squeeze as much happiness as I can out of this lemon, and I'm going to get out of here. This world is not meant for me to give service. This world is not meant for me to gain knowledge or spiritual understanding. It's for me to get what I can out of this world. So this perfect continuity, it's this sort of natural progression. You know, we think of Swamiji as this embodiment of strength, the embodiment of courage and vitality, this message of the infinitude, I'm the Atman. But he was the really embodiment of love and compassion. You know, what the world needs now is love, sweet love, that Dionne Warwick song. He had that. And it reminds us of how important it is in our lives. He said the intellect only goes so far. It's limited. Only love will go beyond that. He had enormous capacity for compassion, and he acutely felt the sufferings of others. He literally felt it himself. When Girish Ghosh, the great Bengali playwright, was with him at Bellarmine, he gave him this long litany of the sufferings of his fellow people right there in Calcutta. He was telling them about, you know, this is going on and that's going on. And Swamiji was really like pained by it. And then he says to Swamiji, you've made a good deal of study of the Vedas and Vedanta, but say, did you find anywhere in those books the way out for us out of these profound miseries and all the wailings of grief and all the starvation? And then he went, and then Girish again goes again and again of this visceral description of all the sufferings that's going on. And Swamiji, after Girish had just finished this litany, Swami just sat there. He was totally speechless. And then his eyes welled up, and he got up and he had to leave, and he just left. He had to leave the room. He couldn't bear it. Tears pouring down his eyes. And then Girish Ghosh told a disciple of Swamiji who was in the room at the time, he said, what a great loving heart Swamiji has. I don't honor your Swamiji simply because he's a pundit of the Vedas. I honor him because of that great heart of his, which just made him leave weeping at the sorrows of his fellow human beings. But Swamiji's weeping at the plight of our fellow human beings isn't what ours is. It's like pure emotionalism or sentimentality. Oh, it's so sad. It's not any kind of hallmark, pull out the stops. Oh, I'm going to cry. Oh, I feel so much better. None of that surface thing that does nothing. It's just a frisson. Swamiji had this deep feeling that comes from real love. And that kind of love is a force. It's a power. It has nothing to do with sentiment. It has nothing to do with ego. Nothing with attachment. It's not attachment. He said, stand on the self, stand on the Atman, and only then can we really love the world. Only then. Swami's disciple, Swami Vivekananda, said that Swamiji was kind and loving by nature to all, but that love did not make him blind to the flaws and defects which needed mending. And then Vivekananda adds kind of rather diplomatically, gentle speech would not always serve the purpose. In other words, he wiped up the floor with them. He even did so with his brother disciples, even those he loved the most. Swami Brahmananda Maharaj, he made him cry. Swami Akhandananda, he made them cry. He was like, his scoldings were like put into a cement mixer that was on fire. It was like unbearable scoldings because all of his laser-like energies just went into. No one could deal with it. But as Vivekananda pointed out, he treated everybody the same way. Everybody had that equal love. He was always universally loving. But he gave scoldings to his own brother disciples, to his own disciples, to the disciples of the other disciples, to the servants. Everybody got the same love, the same scoldings when it needed it. Why these harsh scoldings? Because he knew he wasn't going to live long. He knew that he had to do that work now, and whatever had to be cleaned up needed cleaning up now. But love was there in every case. What's interesting too is he treated exactly the same way his well-heeled Indian princes who were disciples, his wealthy American devotees who were underwriting everything. Same scolding, same harsh treatment. He didn't care. He was completely free. They could like it or not like it. It had to be done. Swamiji said, be unattached. Expect nothing in return. He said, attachment comes only when we expect a return. He said, love shines in freedom alone. When we love, we kind of expect to have some love back. And when we don't, we feel like, that's not nice. That's the way. But if we expect anything, we trap ourselves. Then we lose our own freedom. Vivekananda said Swamiji was not only soft and kind, but was also very hard at times. He said once he was talking to one of his own disciples, who was a monk there at Bellarmine. And while talking to him, he realized that his disciple, this monk, was not doing his job with the servants, because this monk's responsibility was to make sure that the servants were doing what they were supposed to be doing. But this monk was unable to make the servants do their duties. So Swamiji let this monk know that his inability to have them do their job was a weakness. It wasn't the result of love. Swamiji told him, don't think that your heart is full of love because you cannot give them a little scolding now and then. Can you give your life for them? I know you can't because you do not love them. This minute I can die for them, but I can also hang them on that tree this minute if need be. Can you do that? No. My boy namby-pamby is not love. No, love is not weak sentimentality. It's like, whew, man. Swamiji talks about strength a lot. He talks about freedom a lot, but he also speaks a lot about love. But it's not that kind of love that we think of, I love you, you love me, this kind of transactional thing. It had nothing to do with it. He was talking to an American woman about love and about love in marriage. And she, obviously there was some sort of problem because he said, it's not our love that makes us miserable, but the fact that we want love in return. He said, always give. Don't demand. Don't expect. He said, if we want to be free, we want to be happy, expect no return. He wrote a letter to Mrs. Leggett and the Leggett family, of which Tontine and our devotee Prasanna was part of, and our former president, Carl Whitmarsh. The Mrs. Leggett, the scion of the family at the time, he told her, I think by that he means the gods, they are fooling us with these little brains. But this time they won't catch me napping. I found a thing or two beyond brains. And that is love. Swamiji said that for any work, any endeavor that we do, he said love is the best instrument because love is the manifestation of that infinite unity that we simply call God. For all his brilliance, and he was famed for his amazing intellect, he spoke about how utterly small and limited our intellect is. The intellect cannot take us to God. The intellect can't take us beyond the intellect. The intellect cannot take us beyond reason. And that's where the infinite is, beyond reason, because our minds are so small. He said, and if there's any conflict between the heart and the brain, follow your heart. That's a truer compass of what is true. He said it's the culture of the heart, really, not of the intellect, that will lessen the misery of this world. In 1902, Joseph McLeod was standing in Swamiji's room at Bellarmont, and he said, he just told her, like out of nowhere, I shall not live to see 40. She knew that he was 39 at the time. And so she was taken aback, and she said, but Swami, Buddha did his best work between the ages of 40 and 80. But Swamiji said, I delivered my message and I must go. You can imagine how she must have killed her. She said, why go? And he said, the shadow of a big tree will not let the smaller trees grow up. I must make room. He was such a towering figure that he became sort of the focus of attention and focus of all decisions, and others could not grow to their own towering stature if he was still there. Until he was gone, this could never happen. But that, because he's gone, doesn't mean like he's gone. He's not gone. He's still there. He's still with us. He's still giving us his strength and his inspiration. He said not long before he died, he said, it may be that I shall find it good to get outside my body, to cast it off like a disused garment. But I shall not cease to work. I shall inspire people everywhere until the world shall know it is one with God. We have to remember that until we ourselves do our part and realize that we are one with God. That's the goal for all of us. Thank you. Om Namah Shri Ratira Chaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Sarupaya Swamine Tapaharine Swamine Tapaharine. Om. Salutation to Swami Vivekananda, the king of monks and the controller of fashions, who is absolute being, consciousness, and joy itself. He is the world teacher and destroyer of misery. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. And thank you for being here. Now, if there's any questions, issues, disagreements, cavils, everyone okay? Okay, then have a good rest of your afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Next Wednesday, there'll be a reading of the Gospel of Holy Mother Wednesday at 4:30. The following Sunday, Saturday, there will be a reading of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna at 5 p.m. Nothing happening. No one here will be speaking the first weekend in March. So thank you for joining us. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and please come.